Welcome back, everyone, to Beat the Big Guys. I'm your host, Sandy Rosenthal. And today, my guests come from the great state of California, more specifically, San Francisco. And her name is Sophie Constantinou. Hey, Sophie.
Hi, nice to see you, Sandy.
Did I pronounce your name right?
Well, almost. It's Constantino.
No, I did not pronounce it right at all. Constantino, which sounds much prettier than what I said. So I apologize for that. And again, welcome to Beat the Big Guys.
Thank you.
So we're going to be hearing about what Sophie does. It's pretty revolutionary in my mind, since video is actually kind of new in our world anyway, the idea to be able to create a video yourself. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what Ms. Constantino does. Is it all right if I call you Sophie?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about this. And first, so that our listeners can get an idea of where you're coming from, I'd like to do a short introduction, please. Okay,
You
here
want
we
me?
go. I'm going to go ahead and read that now. So, Sophie Constantino is a creative placemaking artist, documentary storyteller, and co founder of Citizen Film, a nationally acclaimed nonprofit organization devoted to inspiring active engagement in civic life. In addition to sparking national reflection, Citizen Film collaborates with local communities to illuminate challenges and opportunities, to disrupt conventional thinking. I like that. And create new landscapes that improve sustainability and environmental health. All beautiful stuff. Sophie's work in her own San Francisco neighborhood of Bernal Heights is guided by the belief that participatory documentary storytelling is a powerful tool for catalyzing and informing sustained civic action and creating a shared sense of place. That is all so beautifully stated, and I can't wait to hear more about it. And before we get deep into your amazing work, I wanted to share with the listeners that coincidentally, I've actually seen one of the projects you've worked on in Bernal Heights. I saw it with my own eyes. This was about 10 years ago. I happened to be visiting my son Stanford while he was living in San Francisco, and we went on a little walking tour of San Francisco, which was so much fun. And he pointed out, I remember very clearly, it was a hill, shocking in San Francisco, right? But what was different about this hill, it was overgrown and just grassy and overgrown in an unkempt way, not in a pollinator nice way. And there was trash. And he pointed out to me that there was a neighborhood from the ground up coalition, if you will, to get that neighborhood cleaned up and if it maybe, I don't remember if they're going to use it for something, but certainly make it look a whole lot better. But it's just so very cool that I'd actually heard about this 10 years ago. So now I really look forward to hearing what's happened since then. So with
Well, should I
that, why
take
don't
it?
you go ahead and take it away, Sophie?
Yeah, well, thanks, Sandy. I mean, I think what you're talking about is something that's so important that as citizens of a city or, a state or a country, we have a responsibility and an ability to make change. And I think in many ways, we often, look around and say, oh, the government isn't doing their job, or this, things aren't right the way they should be. And I think part of this project is taking that next step and saying what's possible, what can we do, and I think the big guys is really an important way of remembering that there are people, entities, powers that seem to have control, and in many ways our communities have more power, more control, and more ability to make change than from the top down. But it's us on a street level, neighbor by neighbor, who can actually make a difference. And I think, you know, for me, the story of citizen empowerment is really important, and it reminds folks that they can make a difference rather than being frustrated or scared or overwhelmed. that together we're actually quite powerful. So the project that I'm involved in, it's I've seen echoes of it all over the city, and I think even all over the nation, where people are taking their public space back into their own hands and saying, I want this space to serve me and my community and my neighborhood. And that does mean that it doesn't shouldn't have trash in it. And it does mean, maybe there's a revival of native plant species where you're seeing pollinator space, and you're seeing the opportunity for growth and healthy nature. But you're also making spaces that people feel like they can congregate in and have fun and know each other. And I think in a city like this one, sometimes, you can go for years without knowing your neighbor. And part of what I've been working on is making sure that you do know your neighbor. And you say, oh, you're going to go away for the weekend. Let's keep an eye on the house. Or, hey, your car is on street sweeping. And I see the street sweeper coming. We have that little text message thread. So I think it makes a difference, and it makes us all safer and happier and healthier.
Absolutely. And so let's I get into your much more of the theory. It's a working thing you've got where involving and using video and documentary making. I mean, we all pretty much know about video, and everyone has a video camera in their hands these days. But what you're doing is documentary making. So tell the listeners about how you're using your documentary making to get this word out.
Yeah. So, what my sort of backstory? So, Citizen Film, we started probably about 20 years ago, and the idea was, as documentary filmmakers, we thought we were a little bit stronger together. That the three of us could really collaborate and support each other in making films and making films that were impactful. For me, there's that moment where people talk about, film making a difference. And I've always been a little skeptical that, documentary film or any film can actually make change itself. It's really the people who watch the film that are then inspired. So you have to make sure that the way that the story is told and the way that you conclude doesn't have people feeling utterly powerless, or as if someone else is going to take care of this business because it's a done deal. So in many ways, when we started the company, we were, how could we support each other to be doing the kind of work sometimes that takes decades, and sometimes it takes just a couple of weeks to really infiltrate the market. And I don't think when we started, the YouTube world and the Instagram world was as active as it is now, but we've found our way in there. For me, though, the most important part, and I in my bio that you read, it says participatory storytelling. For me, the act of documentary filmmaking is a participatory activity, which means we participate in it, right? So the person behind the camera, the person who's being interviewed, all of them are participants. And when the person who's telling their story feels like they've been heard, they become part of the action group, right? They become the activist as part of the team that's pushing an idea forward. So together we do that. And I think it's always been important to me to say that moment, just like we're having right now, the moment where you're asking a question and I'm answering it, I'm actually part of the next step of your action, right? So your activism is having people ask these big questions. Now you've invited me to participate in that. And so every time we turn the camera on, we're inviting folks to be a part of change. And so then, those films, whether they're short films and they're used in community meetings, or they're used at a supervisor's meeting, they're used in City Hall to say, let me just show you a minute, 2 minutes of what's happening on the streets. Because in many ways, this medium is so exciting because you really can transport the viewer into a place. And then if your participants, your interviewees feel like it's their story as well, they can go and take that and say, I'm going to take my movie to this place to show it in this environment, to inspire my community or my neighborhood or my group to think more more expansively about their own power. So I think that's to say, for me, it took a few years, but I think once we got over the hurdle of how do you just make a living doing this thing, which is very independent, and then you start collaborating with folks, regular folks, leaders in communities, say let's do this together. So that's been our mission, and I think we're doing a number of different, sort of, we call them creative placemaking, but really picking issues that are physical, real issues that are happening in the city, and then they're echoed all over the nation. But find those stories and then be able to share them with folks, have meetings about that, and then get those out so that other people can feel like they can use the film as a tool rather than just entertainment.
Can you give us an example, like one of your favorite examples of where your documentary making was able to, meet that end that you're hoping for?
Yeah, so I've been really interested in how we as citizens can look at our public spaces and think about them differently, right? And in many ways, your parks or your open space, they seem to be, part of the environment, uh, but but who fixes them when they're not working, or who takes care of them? And I think uh, we say, well, the city's supposed to do that, or the state's supposed to do that, and then there's that question of they haven't always done the right thing. They haven't always done something that's been beneficial to the people who live there. So we've been working in San Francisco in a community that has gone through what we call redevelopment. And redevelopment was sort of a post-war decision that governments were making that, in fact, we needed more housing density. We needed, a different kind of use of space. So they tore down all these houses and rebuilt them. But that wasn't good for the people who lived there. So this
Mhm.
particular neighborhood, which is the Western Addition, had already had that experience. People had lost their homes, people had lost their anchor in the city, and then they lost their businesses. So as we started working with the community, they said, well, we don't want to see change if it means negative things for us. And so you look at their public space and you say, but this isn't working now. It's kind of ugly, it's kind of decrepit. And so we started asking the city what it would take to fix this park with the community rather than by the city, in their ways. And so we started gathering people together and having those conversations. And one of the things that came up really early was, like I said earlier, that people didn't actually all know their neighbors. So we were working with young people and teaching them storytelling skills and teaching them interview skills, and then started recording them interviewing the elders in the community so they could actually know the history behind the neighborhood they lived in. So you have high school students interviewing 80-year-olds, and then we were able to turn those into short films where everybody, the youth and the elders, would talk about the meaning and the importance of the place they lived in and some of their aspirations for the future. And then there's this thing that they do, at least in our city, which is when a item comes up in front of we have a board of supervisors, but the local government, you say, well, we want to see these changes, and so you can do what's called public comment, which often is one person standing up there complaining for
Right.
2 minutes, and then the bell rings and you go. But we were able to package the film in exactly 2 minutes so that we did have people who were in the film who could have their 2 minutes, but we were able to actually also show the government what it looked like today and what people really felt like, so that then they were able to really step in there and see the importance of um, of making change with the people who live there, not just what it looks good on paper.
And in these meetings, was this like a San Francisco City Council meeting or something of that sort? Okay, and they
Exactly,
and they
exactly.
and they had the technology that they could boom, zoom the video up, and everyone could watch it. They did have the
Yes,
technology.
exactly. They
Well,
do
how,
have the technology.
so this is, oh my gosh. So here it is. City council has the technology, and but the residents don't know, may not know how to use it. I mean, what a tool.
Yeah,
What what a
yeah,
be- what a tool. And you don't even now you are, with your skills and training, you are a professional, but you don't even have to be a pro, okay, at your level to do a pretty good job with your video, with your phone, and just knowing that
exactly.
okay. Now what you're doing is
Yeah,
another level, and I don't mean to be minimizing what you're doing, but you put ideas in my head. I'm thinking, wow, I have to go before city council myself, here in New Orleans on the 10th, and I think I'm going to show up with a video. It never occurred to me.
exactly. Well, and I think that's right. And city council may have, they may have the technology, but I'll tell you, there are a lot of times where you walk into a room and there's no technology. Well, we have a projector and we plug it into,
Mhm.
our phone or our computer. And in fact, the barrier to do that is very small. So
Right,
I think
that's a
we've
small
learned
barrier.
that.
Mhm.
Exactly, and we do that with community meetings, and I think that's been a really great way to kick off a meeting where you say, okay, what are we doing here? Show 5-minute movie, show 2-minute movie, and you say, these are the voices we've heard. What have we missed? These are the voices we've heard. Do you agree? And that's an opportunity for people to, the people who have spoken, to feel heard and to say, yes, that was my voice. That's how I feel. That's my neighbor. I agree with them. And by the way, don't forget this other thing. And rather than those meetings, I'm sure we've all been to community meetings where it turns into a complaining session and everyone's miserable, and it it's all negative. I think we were working towards the idea of how can we create an opportunity for constructive, thoughtful um, participation, and that people, they may have a complaint, but if they say, oh, I'm excited to participate and I've been heard already, so I trust this process will actually work. I think that's been very important. And I think that the flip side is that the city government has told us that they appreciate the fact that we're bringing these stories to them, and people who didn't think they could participate in government are actually realizing that they have a voice and that they can participate. And I think, you know
Any
I
city council, if I'm just going to, I never
yeah,
interrupt, but I'm going to do that right now.
do.
Forgive me. Any city council member or someone of that stature, complains and it doesn't appreciate the involvement and the engagement, shouldn't be serving. Anyway, that's one to drop. I had to say
Exactly.
that.
Well, no, I think that's right, and I do think that the beautiful thing that we've seen is, in fact, most people, whether they're city government or their local, their local nonprofits that are participating in this, that everybody wants to hear what people think. I think that the forum that we have, and I'm sure everyone has their next door or their Facebook groups or whatever, that that are that are complaining, right? We're
Oh
frustrated,
yeah.
and I think San Francisco gets a bad rap for too many homeless people or too much garbage, or there's all these things that we can complain about, but in fact, most people want to see things beautiful. Most people want to feel safe. Most people want to have an opportunity to make a good living and be a part of an
Mhm.
active citizen in their environment. So how do you break down that feeling of powerlessness and turn it into an opportunity for empowerment and teaching, right? Because the citizens of a place they're better teachers than someone who's working in the public works department. They drive through with the street sweeper and they go, oh, now it's clean. It's like, that's not what we need, or that's not enough, or you missed this spot over here. Like, they don't know, they're just getting their job done. So I think that I think sometimes being able to, and if you will excuse the metaphor, zoom in,
Yeah.
you can see the details, get a little bit more of the nuance, and storytelling is really good at that emotional nuance.
Everyone loves
That
a story.
that's right.
Every
And then you could actually identify what the issues are. And part of what we do, just like you do, is take the big picture and you have to cut it down and you have to clarify and you can't let things ramble.
Mhm.
But when you can get to the point,
This is a really
you can
good
make an impact.
This is a really good point, time for me to just to explain to our listeners and make sure they understand what Sophie has just shared with us is such a valuable tool. I cannot overstate it, and I should have realized it myself. You see, you can cram a lot of information in a video that is impossible to do with just sitting there talking. Is it you've got your background, you've got the visual, you've got the audio, you might even have music, but I that might be getting a little bit too much. But you can cram because you only have if like for example, I am going before city council in 2 weeks. I only have 2 minutes, and it's not much time. But a video can crystallize and hone in and get more information through into people's brain way faster than just standing up there and reading from a script, from a pre-prepared script. So that's an incredibly valuable tool. And I bet any pretty much most city council offices or hearings would have the technology that you can show a video. And all you have to do is call in advance and ask, can I show a video? And say, yes, you can, and we'll be prepared for it. So this is an incredibly valuable tool. I've learned something myself, and I've lost count of the number of times I've gone before City Hall, usually I've shown up with a big photo, a blown up photo, or I've read letters, but never occurred to me to do a video. Duh. And now, but I see it, I get it. And now
Yeah.
Sophie's a pro, and not all of you can afford to hire a pro. But that's not what Sophie's here to talk about today. Sophie's here to talk to you about, what you have at your fingertips, the equipment at your fingertips. There was another point I want to say, but I want to go back to you, Sophie, see if you want to um, um, add anything to what I've just said.
Well, you're exactly right, and we've all heard that cliche, "A picture speaks 1,000 words."
Mhm.
But I do think when you're sitting up in city hall, you don't always have a picture in your mind of a place, or you have a picture in your mind of this, the areas that you've seen. And I think what happens so much is that storytelling and filmmaking can take you into the places that people don't always see, into those private spaces, into those intimate places that it might take a while to get there too. And I think that um, there's a great deal of intimacy that can happen with the documentary medium, and that is something that uh, we need to be able to share with those in power, whether they're in government or whether they're a corporation that's, you know, trying to put in a new box shop in the corner, right? We really need to be able to say, actually, that small business has a impact in this neighborhood, or this the fact of this, this traffic in this corner, it doesn't work. Like we need things in place, and you can put all the little, you know, sensors on the road that'll give you a map of how many cars go by. But when you see, oh, that's a blind corner, there's a person on the corner. The car can't see them when they're trying to cross the road or the crosswalk, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we have a lot of tools at our fingertips, and to be honest, I see things on social media that are incredibly well done because they're authentic. And yes, my job, I like to continue to think of myself as a professional, but more and more people have those tools at their fingertips, and it's really the authenticity and the intimacy that can be garnered through the film medium that that is so impactful. So I do think that, you don't need to be, in the profession to do a good job.
Absolutely. And you pointed out one of the first things you said, it's so true. I want to pound that a little bit more. The power of the citizens. People have no idea how powerful they are. They all, I mean, maybe one person alone doesn't have that much power, but even a small group, even a ragtag group of 5 people can be incredibly powerful if they're united around the same thing. If they're all looking for the same thing, and that these people are not being paid. I keep using city council as an example, but city council can tell when you've got a group of citizens that really just want a better quality of life in their neighborhood, and that's why they got themselves down to City Hall, to talk about this. But the power is incalculable of citizens when they work together. And you mentioned that right in the beginning, your documentary making, even 3 people working together is a huge group. So it can't be understated, the value of working together, and we're stronger together. The 5 people working separately is not as strong as 5 people working together. It's 100 times stronger. And then also you're touching on something that I'm a big lover of partnerships. I'm a big lover of an example when you've got a city partnership working with maybe the Arts Council and also working with a neighborhood association. And I love things like that because it just brings so many different sorts of strengths. The city has its strengths, the neighborhood has their strengths, the neighborhood residents who are always watching what's going on in their neighborhood, and then the Arts Council has their strengths, they're artsy. and when I just love the idea of partnerships, and I think I think a partnership idea is much more sustainable and stronger than a straight example. Well, this city is going to take care of this neighborhood, that's it. And I mean, this neighborhood park, and that's it. San Francisco has a lot of parks, a lot. Just about every hilltop has a park, and there's a lot of hills in San Francisco. But I'm not. I actually don't know if many of those parks actually do have a neighborhood component. And do they, Sophie?
That's a good question. I think it depends on where you are
Mm-hmm.
and depends on the neighborhood. But I think some parks, in this city, you have, Recreation and Parks Department manages Golden Gate Park and all of these, this play area and this play area. I think what some places are really stewarded by their neighbors. I know, for example, we have Glen Canyon that's around the corner, and a number of different groups like the California Native Plant Society. They do tours, right? They bring people in. They say, see the 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 native plants and how they survive and how they work with the geology of the place, and how beneficial they are to the pollinators and to our native species. So you get those that kind of mini stewardship in different places depending on where it is. But I think one of the things I'm really interested in, it doesn't have to be a park, but I think parks are great equalizers because we all walk into a park
Mm-hmm.
wanting a little fresh air and a little calm, and they're great places to gather, whether it's the kindergartners in their soccer, or it's the seniors and having a little brunch picnic, something. No, I think those public spaces they're such an asset to us, and they're a kind of a microcosm of the potential of democracy, right? The potential of people coming together, caring for space, and feeling supported. So I think
And
it's a great example.
And what many people may not realize is a public park, let's say, for example, a public park in the Presidio. Okay. The neighbors along the Presidio aren't more important than the neighbors that live away from it. The park is for everybody. It's for everyone. And it really is a beautiful equalizer. There's no such thing as a neighborhood park. There really isn't. A park is public or it's not.
Yeah,
And you can
that's right.
affectionately call something your neighborhood park, but it's really not. It's your public park in your city. they're very beautiful equalizers. I love them. I love them. I wish we had more. There are too many examples of public parks that have been sliced up and sold to people to build houses on, because of the city decided they didn't want to maintain them any longer. So, well, I'm just blown away. I have learned so much in this episode, and I'm going to use what I've learned today. I'm going to get to work, and I'm not a pro videographer, and I don't have to apologize for that. I can take a video with my camera and say, look, I did this with my camera, but I also understand the value of a video, of a short video, and how much can be communicated. A picture's worth 1,000 words, so what's a video worth, Sophie?
Well, great question. I mean, it's 24 frames per second, so
There
it's
you
worth a
go.
lot.
There
Yeah.
you go. Well, we've about run out of time, but is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners before you go?
That's a great question. I think the last thing that I was thinking about, the 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 citizens we didn't talk about that use public spaces and I think are really important, especially in this time where we're seeing climate change in action, is nature, right? So whether they're the birds and the bees or the butterflies, or it's the worms and the bugs in the soil. But I think that the way that we really steward our land is incredibly important to our future health. So as and again, if a park is a great equalizer and everyone is the same in it, I think we are all equally going to see the negative impacts if we don't steward our land and we don't care for the places that we live in, the ground that we stand on. So, like, housing is important, but I also think we need to make all places habitable by having them be ecologically sound, and that means having open space and healthy environment. So
Absolutely. Beautifully stated, and excellent final words for this episode. Thank you so much, Sophie, for joining us.
absolutely, my pleasure.
And thank you, the listeners, for joining us as well. A video version of this episode will be available on my playlist, Speak the Big Guys. And please be sure to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast on all of your favorite platforms. And remember, no matter who you are, you too can beat the big guys. Okay, stay with me.